Luka 7. poglavje od 36. do 50. vrstice. Berem iz sodobnejšega prevoda Življenje z Jezusom. Neki farizej je povabil Jezusa k sebi na pojedino, ki jo je priredil, in Jezus je povabilo sprejel. Prišel je k njemu in se zleknil, da bi jedel. Neka ženska na slabem glasu, ki so jo vsi poznali, pa je izvedela, da je Jezus tam na večerji. Prinesla je alabastrno posodico dragocenega dišavnega mazila in se postavila zadaj ob Jezusove noge. Jokala je. S svojimi solzami je začela umivati njegove noge in jih brisati z lasmi. Potem jih je poljubljala in mazala z dišavo, ki jo je prinesla. Farizej, ki je Jezusa povabil, je to opazoval in si mislil svoje. Če bi bil tale res kak prerok, bi vedel, kakšna grešnica je ženska, ki se ga dotika. Takrat pa se je oglasil Jezus. Simon, nekaj bi vam rad povedal. Prosim, gospod učitelj, le povejte, mu je odvrnil. Neki posojevalec denarja je imel 2 dolžnika. Eden mu je bil dolžen 500 tisočakov, drugi pa samo 50. Vendar pa mu nobeden ni mogel povrniti dolga, zato ga je obema odpustil. Kaj mislite, kateri od obeh dolžnikov ga bo imel bolj rad? Najbrž tisti, ki mu je več odpustil, je rekel Simon. Točno, mu je odvrnil Jezus. Ozrl se je k ženski in nadaljeval. Simon, poglejte tole žensko. Ko sem vstopil, mi niste ponudili vode, da bi si umil noge, kot je v navadi, ona pa mi jih je umila z lastnimi solzami in jih obrisala s svojimi lasmi. Tudi me niste poljubili v pozdrav, ona pa že ves čas, odkar sem tu, poljublja moje noge. Prav tako niste z navadnim mazilnim oljem osvežili moje glave v znak gostoljubja, ona pa je z dragoceno dišavo namazala moje noge. Poglejte, njena velika ljubezen jasno kaže, kaj se je zgodilo. Odpuščeni so ji bili grehi, njeni mnogi grehi. Tisti, ki so mu odpuščene manjše stvari, bo pač kazal manjšo ljubezen. Tedaj je rekel še njej, tvoji grehi so odpuščeni. Tedaj so se ostali povabljenci začeli spraševati, čakajte, kdo je ta Jezus, da kar odpušča grehe? On pa je še enkrat zagotovil ženski, rešilo te je tvoje zaupanje, zdaj lahko živiš v miru.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you all this morning.
Prijetno je biti danes zjutraj tukaj z vami.
Brings me great joy to be back here in Slovenia.
Srečna sem, da sem se vrnila v Slovenijo.
And this morning we're going to unpack this little story in the Gospels.
Danes zjutraj bomo razmišljali o tej kratki zgodbi v evangeliju.
It's just a very short story,
Je zelo kratka zgodba,
maybe a few moments,
le nekaj trenutkov,
but it's deep with meaning.
a ima globok pomen.
So let's explore.
Zato raziskujmo.
So, it's the dinner party of the decade
To je bila zabava desetletja.
in the little town of Bethany.
Odvijala se je v majhnem kraju Betaniji.
And it's being hosted by Simon the Pharisee, who Jesus has healed of leprosy.
Gostil jo je Simon, farizej, ki ga je Jezus ozdravil gobavosti.
And the recently resurrected Lazarus is also a guest, along with Jesus and all his disciples.
Med gosti je bil tudi njegov prijatelj Lazar, ki ga je Jezus pred kratkim obudil od mrtvih, pa tudi sam Jezus in njegovi učenci.
And all the most important people in the town are there.
Prisotni so bili tudi vsi najpomembnejši ljudje tistega mesta.
It was a great party,
Bila je čudovita zabava,
but it would quickly fade into oblivion, except for one moment in that room.
a bi hitro utonila v pozabo, če se ne bi zgodil nek trenutek.
And that was the moment that the room was filled with a most incredible aroma.
To je bil trenutek, ko je sobo napolnila čudovita aroma,
The smell of the most expensive perfume.
vonj dragega parfuma.
And with one whiff of that fragrance, it became a dinner party whose fame has lasted forever.
Zaradi tega je to postala zabava, katere slava traja za zmeraj.
Sorry. So, yeah. And the aroma wasn't just a gentle whisper of delicate fragrance from a passerby.
Ta aroma ni bila samo nek nežen šepet vonjave mimoidočega,
It was like the full-bodied fragrance of an entire bottle of Coco Mademoiselle by Chanel.
bila je bogata vonjava, podobna celi steklenički parfuma Coco Mademoiselle Chanela.
At this party are Martha and Mary,
Na tej zabavi sta bili Marta in Marija.
two sisters with very different personalities.
Dve sestri z zelo različnima osebnostma.
Martha is the rational one, the practical one, the organized one.
Marta je bila tista, ki je bila razumna, praktična, organizirana.
She can plan the most elaborate dinner party right down to the very last crumb.
Planirala je čudovite zabave, vse do zadnje drobtinice.
But Mary's quite the opposite.
Marija pa je bila precej drugačna.
She's a daydreamer.
Sanjačica,
She's the one who just wants to sit and listen and learn and reflect.
tista, ki želi le sedeti, poslušati, se učiti in o tem razmišljati.
She's the emotional one, the spontaneous one, the passionate one,
Ona je tista, ki je čustvena, strastna,
the hopeless romantic.
brezupni romantik.
And here they are serving the men at the dinner party.
Tukaj sta in strežeta tem moškim na banketu.
And while Martha is serving soup,
Medtem ko Marta streže juho,
Mary is playing nervously with this bottle of perfume.
se Marija živčno poigrava s stekleničko dišave.
And you can tell that Mary is the spontaneous, passionate, emotional sister
Lahko ugotovite, da je Marija spontana, čustvena, strastna sestra,
because she's done almost zero planning.
ker ni prav nič načrtovala.
She has clearly not anticipated the consequences of her actions.
Jasno je, da ni predvidela posledic svojih dejanj.
She waits till everyone is seated at the table,
Počakala je, da so se vsi namestili okoli mize,
and then she cracks open the entire bottle of perfume.
nato pa odprla celo stekleničko dišave.
So it spills everywhere and the fragrance is intense.
Vonj se je povsod razširil in bil je močan.
And, oh dear, she forgot to bring a towel.
Ojoj, pozabila je prinesti brisačo.
So she quickly uncovers her head and wipes Jesus' feet with her hair.
Zato je hitro odkrila svojo glavo in Jezusove noge obrisala s svojimi lasmi.
And she kneels there, she's crying tears of joy and gratitude and sadness all over his feet.
Kleči in joče solze sreče in hvaležnosti padajo po njegovih nogah.
And by now everyone has noticed the incredible fragrance.
Do zdaj je vsakdo opazil to čudovito vonjavo.
An awkward silence falls over the room.
Sobo je napolnila neprijetna tišina.
Mary is oblivious.
Toda Marija ni vedela, kaj se dogaja.
She's still weeping and kissing Jesus' feet,
Še naprej je jokala in poljubljala Jezusove noge.
and her long hair is tumbling all over his toes.
Njeni dolgi lasje so padali po njegovih stopalih.
Someone coughs,
Nekdo je zakašljal,
everyone stares.
vsi so strmeli.
Some look down at their soup, somewhat embarrassed.
Nekateri so verjetno gledali v svoj krožnik juhe in bili osramočeni.
And Martha's standing in the corner with a plate of food, rolling her eyes in despair.
Marta je stala nekje v kotu s krožnikom hrane in obupano zavijala z očmi.
Oh no,
Oh ne,
what's Mary doing now?
kaj zdaj počne Marija?
Will she ever stop embarrassing herself and our family?
Ali bo kdaj nehala sramotiti sebe in našo družino?
Simon is feeling uncomfortable.
Simonu je neprijetno,
He's the host.
on je gostitelj.
And maybe someone will think he's hired Mary to be the entertainment for the evening.
Mogoče bo kdo pomislil, da je on najel Marijo, da bi bila razvedrilo večera.
You can just imagine what people would think if this was a scene in the General Conference cafeteria.
Lahko si predstavljate, kaj bi si mislili ljudje, če bi to bil dogodek, ki bi se zgodil v jedilnici generalne
And
konference.
these were maybe Ted Wilson's feet,
Sorry?
Elder Wilson's feet. You know, if it was happening in the cafeteria
A če bi-
with someone.
Če bi nekdo mazilil
Significant.
noge nekoga pomembnega starešine ali koga
I
drugega.
mean, people would start to wonder what is happening.
Ljudje bi se spraševali, kaj se dogaja.
So Simon fumbles for a way to put things right,
Simon zato išče način, kako bi stvari popravil.
and he fails miserably.
In klavrno mu je spodletelo.
He's throwing a dinner party in Jesus' honor.
Gostil je zabavo v čast Jezusu.
He's been cured of leprosy.
Pred kratkim je bil ozdravljen gobavosti.
His friend Lazarus has been raised from the dead.
In njegov prijatelj Lazar je bil obujen od mrtvih.
I mean, two completely amazing and unbelievable miracles.
To sta bila dva čudovita, neverjetna čudeža.
And still quietly, in his own thoughts, he's thinking.
Ampak v svojih mislih si še zmeraj tiho misli.
And he's questioning Jesus' identity.
Dvomi v Jezusovo identiteto.
He thinks,
Razmišlja,
if this man were a prophet, he'd know exactly who is touching him
če bi bil ta človek resnično prerok, bi vedel točno, kdo se ga dotika.
and exactly what kind of woman she is.
In kakšna ženska je ona.
And right there, in Simon's secret and silent thoughts,
Tam v Simonovih skrivnih in tihih mislih
the seeds of spiritual abuse start to sprout.
je vzkalilo seme duhovne zlorabe.
He's actually looking with disdain at Jesus,
Pravzaprav je s prezirom gledal na Jezusa,
even though Jesus has healed him of leprosy
kljub temu, da ga je Jezus ozdravil gobavosti
and raised his friend from the dead.
in njegovega prijatelja obudil od mrtvih.
Perhaps he's not such a great prophet after all.
Mogoče pa le ni tako čudovit prerok,
Because if he was, he wouldn't let this woman touch him.
ker če bi bil, ne bi pustil, da se ga ta ženska dotika.
And he looks with disdain at Mary,
S prezirom je gledal tudi na Marijo.
because she's got quite a reputation.
Ona ima vsekakor sloves.
And once he starts to think these things, his thoughts are rolling down the hill into a potentially toxic and destructive attitude.
Ko začne razmišljati o teh rečeh, se njegove misli kotalijo navzdol po hribu v potencialno strupen in destruktiven odnos.
Because Simon places himself above Jesus and above Mary
Simon sebe namreč postavi nad Jezusa in nad Marijo
and decides that they are both in some way inadequate.
in se na nek način odloči, da sta ona dva oba nezadostna.
He's beginning to dehumanize Mary.
S tem začne razčlovečenje Marije.
And once he's on that slippery slope, it's easier for him to mistreat and abuse her.
In enkrat, ko se znajde na tem spolzkem terenu, je zanj lažje, da z njo ravna nepravilno in jo zlorabi.
Because he sees her, in his opinion, as less than him.
Po njegovem mnenju je ona namreč nekaj manj kot on.
And suddenly the warm, bubbly atmosphere of the party turns awkward.
Naenkrat se ta topla, živahna atmosfera zabave spremeni v neprijetno.
Because someone else whispers loudly about the extravagant waste
Saj je tam še nekdo, ki glasno šepeta o obilni potrati
and the needs of the poor.
in o potrebah revnih.
And Judas is also toppling over the edge into thinking in ways that foster spiritual abuse.
Tudi Juda se na nek način prevrača preko roba in razmišlja misli, ki vodijo v duhovno zlorabo.
Because none of them see that Mary is bringing the very best of her worship.
Noben od njiju namreč ne vidi, da je to Marijino najboljše bogoslužje.
She is bringing a gift that brings joy to Jesus.
Prinesla je darilo, ki je Jezusu prineslo veselje.
But the human beings around her are judging her, misinterpreting her actions.
Toda ljudje okoli nje jo obsojajo in si narobe razlagajo njena dejanja.
And as people listen to Simon and Judas, it makes them also question her generosity and her purest motives.
Ko ljudje poslušajo Simona in Judo, tudi oni začnejo razmišljati, kakšni so njeni vzgibi in ali so čisti.
And without even lifting her eyes, Mary senses the stirring silence.
Ne da bi dvignila svoje oči, Marija začuti to tišino.
And she suddenly realizes that her exuberant act of extravagant worship has been misinterpreted.
Nenadoma spozna, da je bilo to njeno veselo dejanje bogoslužja narobe razumljeno.
And the people around her are not seeing this as worship, they're seeing it as something entirely different.
Ljudje okoli nje tega ne vidijo kot bogoslužje, ampak kot nekaj povsem drugačnega.
Every man in the room is looking at her.
Vsakdo v sobi gleda vanjo.
All her past mistakes are flooding through her mind.
Skozi misli švigajo vse njene pretekle napake.
And she's just consumed by shame.
Napolnijo sram.
Do you know that when our dignity is attacked like hers,
Ali veste, da ko je naše dostojanstvo napadeno, kot je bilo njeno,
we experience the same as if someone is holding a gun to our head?
doživimo enake občutke in travmo, kot če nekdo v našo glavo uperi pištolo.
That's the level of stress we cause to another human being when we shame them.
To je nivo stresa, ki ga povzročimo sočloveku, ko ga sramotimo.
And the post-traumatic stress of this shame can last a lifetime.
Posttraumatski stres takšne situacije lahko traja vse življenje.
The faces, they flicker in the lamplight.
Obrazi so utripali v soju svetilk,
There are sarcastic sneers and knowing glances.
slišal se je sarkastični posmeh in tam so bili pomenljivi pogledi.
And the righteous indignation of gossip savorers.
In upravičeno ogorčenje ljudi, ki uživajo v govoricah.
Different kinds of spiritual and emotional abuse are flickering all around the room.
Sobo so napolnile različne oblike duhovne in čustvene zlorabe.
And they're threatening to stab Mary's very soul and heart.
Te so grozile, da bodo zabodle Marijo v dušo in srce.
And then there's Simon, the host,
Tam je bil Simon, gostitelj,
who evidently knows all about Mary's past,
ki naj bi vedel vse o Marijini preteklosti,
but hasn't come to the realization of her current relationship with Jesus.
a ni spoznal, kakšen je bil njen odnos v tistem trenutku z Jezusom.
He sees her as she was,
On jo vidi takšno, kakršna je bila.
not who she is and who she is becoming.
Ne takšno, kakršna je in ne vidi tega, kar postaja.
She's loved, accepted and forgiven.
Ne ve, da je ljubljena, sprejeta in da je odpuščena.
Jesus has given her dignity and a new start.
Jezus ji je dal dostojanstvo in je omogočil nov začetek.
And Simon's attitude is threatening to derail her peace.
In ta Simonov odnos predstavlja grožnjo njenemu miru.
Simon doesn't say anything out loud,
Simon ničesar ne reče na glas,
but his face says it all.
toda njegov izraz na obrazu pove vse.
He glances at Mary and then at Jesus
Pogleda Marijo in nato Jezusa
with a look of cynicism, contempt and superiority.
z izrazom cinizma, prezira, občutkom vzvišenosti.
And Jesus shows that he is truly a prophet
Jezus pa pokaže, da je resnično prerok,
because he knows exactly what Simon is thinking without Simon saying a word.
On pozna vsako Simonovo misel, ne da bi Simon karkoli rekel.
And Jesus has compassion for all human beings.
Jezus ima sočutje do vseh ljudi
And he had an acute sensitivity to complex social situations.
je občutljiv za kompleksne socialne situacije.
He immediately diagnoses what is happening.
Takoj lahko postavi diagnozo tega, kar se dogaja.
And he can see what's going on in the space between Simon's silent cynicism and Mary's shame.
Vidi, kaj se dogaja v prostoru med Simonovim tihim cinizmom in Marijino sramoto.
And he treats it with the careful precision of a heart surgeon.
In tega se loti tako natančno in pazljivo kot kardiokirurg.
The most urgent soul that needs surgery is Simon.
Najprej potrebuje operacijo Simonova duša.
Simon's contempt and superiority need to be tackled first.
Simonov prezir in občutek vzvišenosti sta tisto, s čimer se mora Jezus najprej soočiti.
You know, contempt happens when one person believes they are superior morally, mentally, physically, socially or spiritually.
Do prezira pride, ko neka oseba verjame, da je na višjem položaju, kar se tiče moralnosti, miselnih sposobnosti, telesnih sposobnosti, na družbenem področju ali področju duhovnosti.
And the emotion of contempt is fueled by adrenaline.
Čustvo prezira še spodbuja adrenalin.
And adrenaline boosts our self-confidence and our self-esteem,
Ta pa spodbuja našo samozavest,
but it pulls a shutter down in our brain so that we cannot feel empathy.
ampak povzroči, da ne moremo čutiti sočutja.
And so it makes us less humane to others.
Zato postanemo manj človeški.
Contempt and cynicism just run across our deeper values of love and compassion.
Prezir in cinizem poteptata naše globlje vrednote prijaznosti in sočutja.
And they tell us the lie that we don't need to care about other people
Povesta nam laž, da nam ni treba biti mar za druge ljudi.
or about their feelings.
ali za njihova čustva.
Because our contempt dehumanizes them and we believe they're inferior to us.
Naš prezir jih namreč razčloveči in verjamemo, da so na nižjem položaju v primerjavi z nami.
And Simon hasn't just considered Mary morally inferior,
Simon ni le mislil, da je Marija na nižjem duhovnem položaju.
he even dared to think of Jesus as spiritually inferior.
Drznil si je celo misliti, da je Jezus na nižjem duhovnem
Because he
položaju.
should know who Mary is.
On bi namreč moral vedeti, kdo je
And
Marija.
of course, Simon thinks he knows exactly who this woman is.
In seveda Simon misli, da on točno ve, kdo je Marija.
Today, psychologists have discovered that there's a toxic cocktail of emotions that are in contempt.
Danes so psihologi ugotovili, da obstaja koktejl čustev.
And when we are contemptuous and we think and do contemptuous things,
Ko smo prezirljivi, mislimo prezirljive misli in izvajamo prezirljiva dejanja,
it actually lowers the efficiency of our own immune system.
to pravzaprav zmanjša učinkovitost našega imunskega sistema.
It makes us more prone to infections and illness.
Bolj smo nagnjeni k okužbam in bolezni.
We feel pain more intensely.
Bolečino čutimo bolj intenzivno.
People who are contemptuous are more likely to experience depression,
Prezirljivi ljudje pogosteje doživijo depresijo,
substance abuse,
pogosteje zlorabljajo substance,
relational breakdown,
uničijo se njihovi odnosi
and chronic exhaustion.
in so kronično izčrpani.
These are the side effects of drinking the toxic chemical of contempt.
To so stranski učinki tega, da pijemo strupen prezir.
And cynics also have issues.
Ciniki imajo težave
They're very similar attitudes.
s podobnim vedenjem.
Cynicism leads to judgmental attitudes,
Cinizem vodi v kritiko,
giving negative labels to others,
dajanje negativnih oznak,
imagining they have negative motives when they're actually pure,
pripisovanje negativnih motivov ljudem, ko imajo ti pravzaprav čiste motive.
believing the worst in others rather than the best.
Verjamejo, da vidijo v drugih najslabše namesto najboljšega.
There might be some non-verbal contempt, a sort of rolling of the eyes and a disdainful look.
Pogosto neverbalno zaničujejo ljudi s tonom glasu ali zavijanjem z očmi.
They might mock people out loud.
Ljudem se na glas posmehujejo
And this leads to destructive emotions for the cynic and for the victim.
in to vodi do destruktivnih čustev tako od cinika kot njegove žrtve.
And it actually has a negative effect on everyone who witnesses that interaction.
To ima negativne posledice tudi za vsako osebo, ki je priča takšni interakciji.
And what is the antidote to this toxin?
Kaj pa je protistrup?
Compassion and kindness.
Prijaznost in sočutje.
The thinking about what the other is experiencing.
Razmišljanje o tem, kaj doživlja druga oseba.
Empathy.
Sorry?
Empathy.
Sočutje.
Treating them with kindness and lifting them up.
Prijaznost, izgrajevanje.
And so rather than giving his host a public telling off, Jesus shows him compassion and empathy.
Namesto tega, da bi Jezus javno okregal svojega gostitelja, mu pokaže sočutje in prijaznost.
He models the gentleness and kindness he wants to see in Simon.
Je vzor nežnosti in prijaznosti, ki jo želi videti v Simonu.
And even though he sees he's contemptuous,
Čeprav vidi, da je prezirljiv,
Jesus is deeply respectful.
je Jezus globoko spoštljiv.
He doesn't meet that contempt with contempt.
Ne vrača preziru s prezirom.
He doesn't want to offend him at his own dinner party.
Ne želi užaliti Simona na njegovi lastni zabavi.
And so he just tells him a very simple story
Zato mu pove preprosto zgodbo
of two forgiven debts, a huge one and a small one.
o dveh dolgovih, ki sta bila pozabljena, majhnem in velikem.
And says, Simon,
In
which
reče,
debtor will love his forgiver more?
Simon, kateri izmed dolžnikov bo svojega posojitelja ljubil bolj?
And Simon reflects,
Simon razmisli
the one forgiven most.
in odgovori, da tisti, ki mu je bilo odpuščeno več.
And this short story starts to change Simon's mind and heart.
Ta kratka zgodba začne spreminjati Simonovo srce in misli.
Because in this story, Jesus has awakened his empathy and compassion.
S to zgodbo je Jezus zbudil njegovo sočutje in empatijo.
What will they feel like if they've been forgiven most?
Kako se počuti tisti, ki mu je bilo največ odpuščeno?
And it helps Simon to understand why Mary is doing this incredible thing.
To Simonu pomaga razumeti, zakaj Marija počne to čudovito stvar.
That this is her loving response to being generously forgiven.
Razume, da je to njen ljubeč odziv na to, da je bilo obilno odpuščeno.
And the surgery is complete.
Operacija je zaključena.
Because Simon's contemptuous heart has been healed and is now compassionate.
Simonovo prezira polno srce je bilo ozdravljeno in je zdaj sočutno.
And Simon realizes in that moment that Jesus is truly a prophet after all.
V tistem trenutku Simon spozna, da Jezus resnično je prerok,
Because Jesus read the thoughts he hadn't even spoken aloud.
ker je prebral njegove misli, ki jih ni izrekel na glas.
And his heart is transformed by God's love.
Njegovo srce je bilo preobraženo zaradi Božje ljubezni.
The seeds of contempt and spiritual abuse die in his heart.
Semena prezira in duhovne zlorabe so v njegovem srcu umrla.
And in their place, the seeds of compassion start to flourish.
Nadomestila so jih semena sočutja.
Simon is safe for now.
Za zdaj je Simon varen,
His contemptuous attitude has been touched and healed.
njegov prezirljiv odnos je bil ozdravljen.
And he will never forget the compassionate, loving touch of Jesus in that awkward moment.
In nikoli ne bo pozabil tega sočutnega Jezusovega dotika v tem neprijetnem trenutku.
So Jesus quickly turns his attention to Mary because she needs healing too.
Jezus zdaj svojo pozornost hitro preusmeri k Mariji, ker tudi ona potrebuje zdravljenje.
And he extends love and compassion to her.
Tudi njej pokaže ljubezen in sočutje.
He needs to take care of her urgent emotional and relational needs in this really gut-wrenching situation.
Zadovoljiti mora njene nujne čustvene in odnosne potrebe v tej situaciji.
And Jesus knows exactly who this woman is.
Jezus ve točno, kakšna oseba je ona.
She is a forgiven, beloved and blessed daughter of God.
Je Božja hči, ki je bilo odpuščeno in je ljubljena.
And right now, her beautiful act of worship and gratitude is the kindest and most compassionate thing anyone has ever done for him.
Njeno čudovito dejanje bogoslužja je v tem trenutku najbolj prijazna in hvaležnosti polna stvar, ki jo je kdo kadarkoli naredil zanj.
Because interestingly, Mary, more than anyone else, has understood about Jesus' ministry.
Zanimivo je, da je Marija bolj kot kdorkoli drug razumela, da je bilo bistvo Jezusove službe.
She can see that Jesus is bringing his extravagant love to a broken world.
Prinašanje in kazanje ljubezni temu zlomljenemu svetu.
And the only response to experiencing such extravagant love is to give extravagantly back.
Edini odziv na doživljanje takšne obilne ljubezni je, da obilno vračamo.
And so she has taken the best that she has and poured it extravagantly all over him.
Zato je vzela najboljše, kar je imela, in to obilno zlila nanj.
And then Jesus considers the other people in the room.
Jezus na to pomisli tudi na ostale ljudi v sobi.
He knows what's going through each of their minds.
Ve, kaj se dogaja v njihovih mislih.
He knows that many of them are all too aware of Mary's history.
Ve, da mnogi izmed njih poznajo Marijino zgodovino.
And Jesus knows if he doesn't intervene right here and right now,
Jezus ve, da če ne bo posredoval prav zdaj v tem trenutku,
Mary will have to live out the rest of her life in Bethany.
bo morala Marija do konca svojega življenja živeti v Betaniji
And she'll have to drag the painful story of her murky past behind her.
kjer jo bo spremljala boleča zgodba o njeni omadeževani preteklosti.
She will always be at risk from gossip, smudges on her reputation,
Vedno bo izpostavljena govoricam in madežem njenega ugleda,
painful social situations,
bolečim socialnim situacijam.
and the temptation to soothe the pain of all of that distress by slipping back into her old life.
In imela bo skušnjavo, da bi se s to bolečino spoprijela tako, da bi se vrnila v prejšnji način življenja.
Mary is vulnerable to the contemptuous abuse of everybody else in this room.
Marija je v tem trenutku izpostavljena zlorabi s prezirom vseh ljudi v tej sobi.
Because Judas is still whispering bitterly about the extravagant waste and the needs of the poor.
Juda namreč še zmeraj grenko šušlja o tej obilni potrati in potrebah.
And Martha's rolling eyes and tight lips express her silent disapproval.
Martine očmi, s katerimi zavija, in tesno stisnjene ustnice izražajo njeno nestrinjanje.
And Mary is feeling exposed and misunderstood like a rabbit caught in the headlights.
Marija se počuti izpostavljeno in narobe razumljeno kot zajec, ki ga osvetlijo žarometi.
And the abusive contempt of all those around her batters her fragile self-worth.
Zloraba s prezirom vseh teh okoli nje zlomi njeno krhko samovrednost.
In that moment she is sad, she's afraid, she's alone, she feels unwanted.
V tem trenutku se počuti žalostna, prestrašena, sama, nezaželjena.
And her relationship with her friends, her family and her community are about to be broken once again, and the pain feels intolerable.
Njeni odnosi s prijatelji, družino in skupnostjo bodo znova zlomljeni in ta bolečina se zdi neznosna.
But Jesus, filled with compassion, shows her extravagant love that will overcome her shame forever.
Jezus pa je poln sočutja in ji pokaže ljubezen, ki bo za večno nadomestila njen sram.
First he tells Simon to see Mary, to really see her.
Najprej reče Simonu, naj pogleda Marijo, naj jo resnično vidi.
To see her as a fellow human being.
Naj jo vidi kot sočloveka,
Not just to ignore her like an invisible servant.
naj je ne ignorira kot nekega nevidnega služabnika.
Look at her, Simon, he says, really look.
Reče, poglej jo, Simon, resnično jo poglej.
Because I want you to see her as I see her.
Želim namreč, da jo vidiš, kot jo vidim jaz.
I want you to see every human being as I see them.
Želim, da vidiš vsakega človeka, kot ga vidim jaz.
And you need to see her as a beloved human being, as worthy of forgiveness as you are.
Videti jo moraš kot ljubljeno človeško bitje, ki je tako vredno odpuščanja, kot si ti.
Someone who loves me more because she has been forgiven more.
Videti jo moraš kot nekoga, ki me ljubi bolj, ker mu je bilo več odpuščeno.
She's a daughter of God who deserves the deepest respect and the gentlest care.
Je Božja hči, ki si zasluži globoko spoštovanje in nežno ravnanje.
Simon and everyone else in Bethany need to know she has a new life now.
Simon in vsi ostali v Betaniji morajo vedeti, da ima Marija zdaj novo življenje.
Her heart has found Jesus, the real love she's been searching for all of her life.
Njeno srce je našlo Jezusa, tisto pravo ljubezen, ki jo je iskala celo življenje.
Her soul hunger has been more than satisfied.
Lakota njene duše je bila več kot samo zadovoljena.
And her extravagant and fragrant gift will comfort Jesus on his journey to Calvary.
Njen obilen, dišeč dar bo spremljal Jezusa na njegovi poti proti Kalvariji.
Don't bother her, he says kindly.
Ne moti je, reče Jezus prijazno.
Leave her alone, he says gently,
Pusti jo pri miru, reče nežno,
as he looks into her tearful eyes.
medtem ko gleda v njene solzami polne oči.
What she is doing is incredibly beautiful.
To, kar počne, je neverjetno lepo.
She welcomed me when no one else did.
Sprejela me je, ko me nihče drug ni.
She has anointed me.
Mazilila me je.
She has washed my feet.
Očistila je moje noge.
And more than that, her extravagance has brought joy to my own soul.
In ne samo to, njeno obilje, njen obilni dar je mojemu srcu prinesel veselje in tolažbo.
And in case that isn't enough to silence their gossip and encourage their respect,
Če to ni dovolj, da bi utišalo njihove govorice in spodbudilo njihovo spoštovanje,
he tells them that the story of Mary's fragrant gift will be told around the world, everywhere, always.
in pove še, da bo ta zgodba o Marijinem dišečem darilu pripovedovana po vsem svetu, zavedno.
The room is silent.
Soba je tiha,
The moment is breathtaking.
to je dihjemajoč trenutek.
Jesus has not made a blind man see or a lame man walk,
Jezus ni ozdravil slepega ali hromega,
but he has demonstrated compassion and gracious love
pokazal pa je sočutje in milostno ljubezen.
and healed two very broken human beings.
Ozdravil je dve zelo ranjeni srci.
a contemptuous man who wasn't even aware of his heart disease,
prezirljivega človeka, ki se ni zavedal svoje bolezni srca,
and a broken woman who was painfully aware of hers.
in žensko, ki se je boleče zavedala njene bolezni.
And he did this with the everyday transformative miracles of kindness and compassion.
To je storil z vsakodnevnimi, spreminjajočimi čudeži sočutja in prijaznosti.
Tools of heart surgeons that we can all use every day.
To so orodja kardiokirurgov, ki jih lahko vsi uporabljamo vsak dan.
And I pray that we will all learn how to show this gracious love to others
Molim, da bi se vsi naučili, kako to milostno ljubezen pokazati drugim.
and share in the healing work of Jesus.
In kako bi tudi mi sodelovali v tem delu zdravljenja, ki ga upravlja Jezus.
We can look at people through eyes of compassion instead of contempt.
Na ljudi lahko gledamo z očmi sočutja namesto prezira.
We can see every individual as beloved and precious to God.
Vsakega posameznika lahko prepoznamo kot ljubljenega in Bogu dragocenega.
We can choose to honor others above ourselves instead of putting them down.
Lahko se odločimo, da bomo druge cenili celo bolj kot sebe, namesto da bi jih poniževali.
And we can believe that they have the best motives,
Lahko verjamemo, da imajo najboljše vzgibe,
not the worst.
ne najslabših.
We can notice the good and beautiful in other people's lives
Lahko opazimo tisto, kar je dobro in čudovito v življenju drugih
and build
ljudi
them up and not demolish them.
in jih izgrajujemo, namesto da bi jih uničili.
And we can reach out in love
Lahko pokažemo ljubezen,
as Jesus did.
kot jo je Jezus.
Defend those who are being shamed and abused by others,
Branimo tiste, ki so jih drugi sramotili in zlorabili.
those who are being bullied and humiliated.
Tiste, ki so ustrahovani in poniževani.
And we can remember that Jesus was crucified for us
Lahko si zapomnimo, da je bil Jezus križan za nas.
by a crowd of people who believed that they were spiritually superior.
Križala ga je skupina ljudi, v kateri so vsi verjeli, da so oni na višjem duhovnem položaju kot
And they
on.
looked down on him and spat on him with contempt.
Nanj so gledali navzdol in plunili nanj s prezirom.
And in that place, we can understand the dangerous places where spiritual abuse can take us.
Tako lahko razumemo nevarnosti, do katerih lahko vodi duhovna zloraba.
We're called to be like Mary,
Poklicani smo, da bi bili tudi mi kot Marija,
humbly aware of God's incredible love and forgiveness for each one of us.
da bi se ponižno zavedali Božje čudovite ljubezni in odpuščanja, ki je na voljo vsakemu od nas.
Filled with delight at everything he is doing for us.
Da bi bili polni radosti zaradi vsega, kar počne za nas.
Celebrating our gratitude to him in generous and extravagant ways.
Da bi praznovali svojo hvaležnost Bogu na velikodušne in razkošne načine.
Pouring out the best we have on his feet.
Da bi na njegove noge zlili najboljše, kar imamo.
And bringing the fragrance of his love into this broken world.
In prinesli dišavo njegove ljubezni na ta uničen svet.
And we're also called to be like Jesus.
Poklicani smo, da bi bili kot Jezus.
Being kind to others, not hurting them.
Da bi bili prijazni in ne bi poškodovali drugih.
Being compassionate, not critical.
Da bi bili sočutni in ne kritični.
Being accepting rather than judgmental.
Da bi jih sprejemali namesto obsojali.
Taking away the shame of others and lifting them up.
Da bi zmanjšali njihovo sramoto in jih raje dvignili.
Clothing others with dignity.
Ogrnili s dostojanstvom.
And seasoning our conversations with kindness.
In da bi napolnili naše pogovore s prijaznostjo.
So that we can bring the healing skills of God's love into every conversation.
Tako da lahko te zdravilne lastnosti Božje ljubezni prinesemo v vsak pogovor
At every opportunity.
in vsako situacijo.
Helping to create this beautiful picture of a loving God who loves each one of us.
Lahko sodelujemo v tem, da ustvarimo to čudovito sliko o ljubečem Bogu, ki ljubi vsakega izmed nas.
And today it's my prayer that we'll be filled with the Spirit, of the fruits of the Spirit.
Danes molim, da bi bili napolnjeni z Svetim Duhom in njegovim sadom.
And that fruit can grow in our lives
Naj ta sad raste v naših življenjih,
so that we can become more like Jesus in every relationship.
da lahko v vseh odnosih postanemo podobni Jezusu.
Because when we are loving, joyful, peaceful,
Ko smo ljubeznivi, veseli, mirni,
patient, kind, good,
potrpežljivi, blagi, dobrotljivi,
faithful, gentle, and self-controlled,
zvesti, krotki in imamo samoobvladanje,
then we will create a community that is safe and free from risk and harm.
ustvarimo skupnost, ki je varna, v kateri ni,
Where each person will feel safe and respected.
v kateri se vsaka oseba počuti varno in spoštovano.
And all those around us will know that we are Christians because of our love.
In vsi okoli nas bodo vedeli, da smo kristjani zaradi naše ljubezni.
And this is my prayer for each one of us today.
To je moja molitev za vsakega izmed nas danes.
In Jesus' name,
V
amen.
Jezusovem imenu, amen.